So that's it for me. If you have any questions, my email address is similar to Allison's. It's J, as in Jennifer, Levine, which I think you're seeing on my screen, JLEVINE @cast.org. I would love to hear comments. And as we move into the question and answer session, I'm certainly happy to take questions and hopefully be able to answer them.
That's great, Jen. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here live from wherever you are at the moment.
I am in the happiest place on earth. Yes, I am.
So we have an opportunity to get some questions from our live audience here or our online audience. And let me see if I can get our pictures all up here. There we go. So we have Shelby and Lois still available who can talk to the teacher representation of how UDL works in a classroom. We've got Jen who's able to answer any kind of questions that would have to do with sort of the design of UDL, and I can answer some questions too. What questions do we have? Go ahead.
To what is UDL a response, both at the teacher level and the educator level?
Okay, the question was, to what is UDL a response? So what is UDL responding to from the teachers and from?
For the teachers, how you've had to learn something new, which means different than you were trained. What is it you were trained in, or what is it that UDL has developed as? And it sounds like also the last speaker, we were talking about almost we've moved from it's all nature to it's all nurture. In other words, it's no longer the individual's responsibility at all, it's just the environment. It seems to me there is some balance that needs to be. Some kids don't, like myself, don't have a great ear for languages. And so how does the innate struggle with not having a good ear for language, regardless of all the different things? And it also feels like it's driving teachers crazy. If for each goal, they've got to have 75 different things.
Yeah, those are some good questions. Did you all catch those, or do you need me to repeat that?
Unless I don't know if anyone in who's listening remotely needs things repeated. What I heard is it sounds like this is saying that it's all nurture, not nature, and that to have to design 50 different things is overwhelming. Those were kind of the two things that stuck with me. Are those kind of correct?
Well, let's start there. Yeah, that's a good place to start.
The first one I'm more interested in, which is what's UDL a response?
Okay. So I think, I think it's, if this is not the way we were trained as teachers, then
individualized instruction, is that what?
So UDL is a response to the fact that all students are not successful academically, and so Jennifer gave a little bit of the background of how UDL came to be. Basically, there was a group of neuroscientists out of Harvard who began in the mid-'80s designing technology to support students with severe physical disabilities. So they were some of the first people to do the chin buttons for students, or to do some of the eye scanners so that students who are paralyzed can use a computer to type with their eyes. And what the researchers found is that even when they created these great technologies, when the students went to school, they were still segregated. The teachers still weren't teaching them. They were kind of still plopping them in front of, low-level work because of physical disabilities. So then CAST started working with the teachers themselves and helping them to figure out how to integrate the students into the regular ed classroom. But what they found was still these students were segregated somehow at the back of the classroom. And so then CAST began working with teachers to design curriculum that would include all students, regardless of what their IEPs said. I'm not meaning that the IEPs were ignored, but that they would be included in the general education classroom, not separated at the back of the room doing something different. And what they found was that when options for these students were offered, students who did not have IEPs were also starting to benefit, and that they were learning more because they were being allowed to learn in the way that worked for them. So I'm not sure that it was necessarily a reaction to something as much as it was research showing that by universally designing, all students were benefiting. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I think so. And something else that stuck out to me is that you're absolutely right in thinking that trying to plan every lesson, and like Shelby said, she's got six preps. So trying to plan every lesson with 4 or 5 options is super overwhelming. And as a teacher, that's not reasonable. And so what a lot of people will do when they're starting out with UDL is to just add one thing. So if all you are used to doing is lecturing, then add a PowerPoint. Or if all you're used to doing is lecturing with a PowerPoint, then maybe you need to add one turn and talk activity, right? So just add one thing. And then once you get to the place where you feel like that's comfortable, then the next semester or the next school year, add one more thing. Yeah, I was just getting ready to. So Shelby and Lois, did you all have any thoughts?
Yeah, I would also say that, like, you're not necessarily looking at different assignments for these students, but adaptations of the same assignment. So like I would still give like the same problem set, but in different ways. So I have students that would prefer to sit down and do it on paper, some that would prefer to do it on Khan Academy where it checks for you, some that would rather get up and move around the room. And so like it's taking these same things I'm already doing and adapting them, but not adding more time to myself, if that makes sense. Like it really is not these separate assignments and more so like the way that you're adjusting them within your room.
And just to add onto it, from my perspective, I can really relate to that concern about, you know, adding time into your already busy schedule to plan out lessons and activities. But I would say that once you decide that you're going to invest in UDL, it's constantly on your mind. You know, you're always thinking of, oh, I could do this in my lesson, and that will just add one more menu option for my students during assessment. And so there is some time that you put into it, but really it's something that's happening in the back of your mind all the time, I think. So it feels at first a little intimidating to have to figure out where you're going to find time to create activities and lessons and assessments, but it really isn't, because you get excited and then you're thinking about it always.
Yeah.
It does become.
Oh,
sorry.
No, I was just going to say, as we started learning more about UDL really fast, so we noticed that these accommodations and these changes would come easier than we expected it would.
Why is that not the predominant mode at UK in teaching?
Yeah, that's a great question. His question is, what if this is beneficial, then why is this not what we're learning in universities? Because it's not how we've always done it, to be honest with you. Although it's changing, it is very slowly changing. There's been a lot of movement in higher ed recently toward UDL for all faculty, but also at the ed schools, in the schools of ed. So it's slowly working its way there. It's still in some places stuck in special ed land, and it's not really out into where just a random second grade teacher might learn about it. But yeah, it's coming, but it's coming slow. That would be my.
Can I just address the nature versus nurture question?
Sure.
So I think UDL does not say that there are no differences. In fact, UDL is all about the fact that we are all variable, that there is no such thing as an average way of learning. And that even if I were the exact average learner, how I learn today in this setting might not be how I learn tomorrow in a different setting. I might have you know, if I had a fight with my brother on the way to school this morning, I might respond or differently today than tomorrow when I win the award for best human being ever. And that's what Allison was talking about, how emotions also play into. And I'll just give you a quick analogy. So what UDL is saying is not that there aren't differences in learners, but that something becomes a disability only when the environment is not designed to support that person's variability. So an example I'll give, David Rose, one of the founders of CAST, his wife has perfect pitch. And she was, before they got married, a semi-professional singer. She had visions of, you know, family life filled with kids in cars singing an 8-part harmony as they drove through the mountains, and, you know, everything being joyful and wonderful. And unfortunately, she married David, who has no ear for music and conveniently passed that gene on to all of their kids. And so they go to church every Sunday, and David's wife is, despite this amazing talent that she has of perfect pitch, she is completely disabled at church because they get in, she opens the hymnal, she sees the music on the page, and she can hear exactly to however many vibrations per second what the note should sound like. And then the organ starts playing, and it's slightly sharp, and so she's hearing what it should sound like in her from looking at the notes on the book. But then she's hearing something that clashes in the organ, and then David starts singing, and he's just, you know, not even flat or sharp. He's just singing all over the place, has nothing to do with the notes, and the people behind her singing, you know, everyone's this cacophony of noise for her. And so she shuts down and she cannot sing at all. And every year the choir director begs David to join the choir because he's there belting it out, and has never once asked the semi-professional singer to join the choir because she can't sing in church. And so to me, that's an example of how an ability or a disability is situational. And, you know, you can take it to the extreme and ask, well, how could we imagine that such and such is actually a great ability in another setting? But the concept there is that it's not that my son has some extremely significant learning disabilities, and I am not unaware of that. But when a lesson is designed in a way that he can access it, he's capable of learning. When it is not designed in a way that he can access it, when he has to sit in, which he does most days of his life, a very traditional classroom with someone talking at him and him going through the pages in the book, his disabilities are preventative and he cannot learn. So it's not that it's nature versus nurture. There are absolutely people who are blind. There are people who are deaf. There are people who are paralyzed. There are people with learning disabilities. But those things aren't incapacitating in an environment that has been correctly designed.
So Walt, I want to grab some questions from online. Are there any questions that have jumped out at you that you wanted to share?
What about the one from EL Visca? Was that 232? About 7 or 8 minutes ago. You scroll up.
So with regards to teaching mathematics, how do you apply UDL in problem solving? How do you eliminate barriers such as fear of mathematics and help students understand algebra and calculus?
I can take this one.
That's you, Shelby.
That's all me, yeah. So I'm also trying to do my national board certification this year. And there's a standard that's a part of it that's combating the math phobia that comes when with some students. And so I would say that UDL has helped that a lot because students are able to take the way that they learn best and adapt it to math, when normally math has been in the past such a very specific way to do things. And I remember my teachers growing up that if I didn't, answer the question the exact same way that they wanted me to, that I wouldn't get that question right. And so like focusing more so on them actually learning that material and not their necessary problem solving methods, I think is really helpful, because you're going to have students that learn and problem solve in very different ways.
So I think it's crucial that you give them the opportunity to problem solve in a way that makes the most sense to them. And you know, sometimes that's creating your own problems to find a solution to, or using something that you already have around you. And sometimes they need more prompt and need to be given a very specific problem to address, or very specific questions or topics to address. But really, when you have these students with different varying levels of comfort in math, this UDL is really going to help with that kind of stuff, because students are able to take more and, you know, take more from their learning and make more choices regarding how they're going to learn that material.
Yeah, and I'd like to piggyback on that too. So I taught at a school for students with specific learning disabilities. So all of the students at the school had some form of a learning disability. And when they would first arrive at the school, a lot of them transferred mid-year from other schools, they would sort of have this I can't do it attitude to them. And I was teaching art at the time. And so some students just think they can't do art. And they would tell me, well, I can't draw, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. And we just got into the habit of saying, well, it's not that you can't, you just haven't had a teacher teach you in a way that makes sense to you yet. And for some reason, when they heard that, they would be like, oh, well, yeah, I guess maybe that's true. And it was a way of changing their thinking about it. It's not that you can't, you just haven't figured out how yet, or you haven't been taught in a way that makes sense to you yet. Do you want to take another question from the chat?
Yeah. What about 2:34 p.m.?
2:34 p.m.
It's Rosie.
Okay, so Rosie's asking about UDL versus differentiation versus personalization. Yeah, that's tricky. So yes, I'm sorry. So UDL versus differentiation versus personalization. So these are all kind of buzzwords in education. So we know what UDL is. Differentiation is really what we talked about when we looked at the analogy for the Mexican lasagna, and we had the Mexican lasagna and the vegetarian option and the beans and rice. And so differentiation looks like me making really different lessons for each student, like almost individually different lessons for each student. And so that's that short order cook thought process. And personalization, some people will use that interchangeably with UDL. It's not exactly the same. And Jen, maybe you can speak to that a little more clearly as to what the exact differences are.
It's interesting because we are doing statewide implementation of universal design in New Hampshire. And the reason that we are doing statewide implementation of UDL in New Hampshire is because they have a statewide mandate to make personalized classes. And I think what we have found is personalization is a word that is used regularly without a set definition. It's sort of like you hear good teaching, and everyone sort of is supposed to know what good teaching is, but my definition might be different than your definition, which might be different from, you know, Joe Schmo's definition. And so personalization, UDL is a way of personalizing. There would be people who personalize in different ways, but because it's so undefined, there's not really there's no head-butting between the two. I think they can be one and the same thing. Differentiation, I would agree with you, Jen, is this idea that I do my one lesson for everyone, and then I pick out different things. Okay, but for this kid, he's going to need this, so I do that for him, and I do this for that kid over there, instead of, you know, allowing the wheelchair ramp, anyone can use it. It's not just someone in a wheelchair. If you have luggage, you can use it. If you have your baby carriage, you can use it. Anyone who finds the ramp useful is welcome to use it, and anyone who doesn't find it useful is welcome not to use it. I'm going to mute because they're vacuuming near me here.
Okay, any other questions from the live audience we have here? Okay.
We do have a question looks like from Carrie. With the increased awareness of, say...
Okay, yeah, so with the increased awareness of adverse childhood events, or ACE, and other traumas, I'm thankful for the ways choice and empowerment is a part of UDL. Does anyone know of particular research around this? It sounds like Carrie's a nurse in grad school for nurse education. She's taught yoga and all kind of other fun stuff. So anything, and Jen, you're gonna have to answer this one too. I don't have the research memorized, unfortunately.
Yes. So my background actually is in trauma-sensitive schools. I was the principal of a high school for students who were involved in the juvenile justice system, and lots of trauma there. It's a little bit too long of a question to answer in terms of just what research exists out there. There's some great books I could recommend to you if you want to send me an email, and anyone else who's interested in that. JLEVINE@cast.org, and I can send you some great resources. My resources tend to be education related as opposed to nursing related, but I would imagine there's quite a bit of overlap there.
Asking if there's research that if you use UDL principles with those youngsters who are ACE involved, that it allows them to feel more positive because of the choices, et cetera, and more control.
I'm not sure, actually. It's a good question.
No, I'm asking if that's the question she's asked.
Yeah, well, and it's not exactly a question, but it sort of is a question. The specific question she asked was, does anyone know of particular research around this? So yeah, I guess she was asking for specifics. Thanks, Karen. And you know what?
I don't know specific research that says that choice, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I personally don't know of research that says choice in and of itself helps students with chronic trauma to feel better about themselves. I do know that the UDL guidelines talk pretty specifically about minimizing threats and distractions, which is something that's incredibly important for students with who struggle with chronic trauma. So I don't know if that's what I can give you a lot of information on UDL and chronic trauma. I don't have any evidence that shows that choice specifically does anything.
See a certain trend in one part, learning style, individuals with SLDs are. Okay, so Scott's got a quick question. Do you see any certain trend in one part, learning style, that individuals with SLDs, specific learning disabilities, are utilizing now more than before? I know there's been a lot of research on executive functions and how those play a part of student success. And that's actually something I'm thinking about writing a dissertation on, actually, because it's fascinating to me. We did some evaluation of student feedback at CELT, and it came to the conclusion that there's three things that students are saying that they need help with, and the biggest one, the most requested thing, is things like time management, organization, prioritizing, which is all executive function. So the problem is that, unfortunately, sometimes students who have specific learning disabilities don't realize that they need help with executive function. Do you know? So to me, that's been the disconnect there. But hopefully that will change. Okay, we'll see. Are there any other questions that we need to touch on before we head on out? Good. Okay, well, I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists, our presenters today, and to Human Development Institute, HDI, for inviting me to do the webinar today. It's been wonderful, and I hope that we've really opened a lot of minds to universal design for learning. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Okay, I'm leaving.